The deep hum of the engine echoed through the small ship's cabin as Lieutenant Ethan Miles scanned the barren landscape of the rogue planet below. The Zentaros Nebula stretched out like a vast cosmic ocean around him, its swirling colors casting an eerie glow over the controls. Ethan had been in space for over a month, drifting between star systems as part of Earth's solar fleet. It had been an uneventful mission so far until now. His target was a rogue planet orbiting no star, drifting alone in the darkness. It wasn't on any chart, and it was emitting a series of strange energy pulses that had intrigued the solar fleet back on Earth. His orders were simple: investigate the anomaly, report back, and move on. But nothing ever went as planned. As Ethan descended into the planet's atmosphere, the first warning light blinked on his console. Gravitational instability detected, the ship's AI chirped in its neutral robotic tone. He gripped the controls tightly. The readings didn't make sense. One moment everything was stable, and the next it was as if the planet had shifted beneath him, pulling him in with invisible hands. Easy now, Ethan muttered to himself as the ship bucked under the growing pressure. He pushed back on the controls, trying to level out the descent. But then another alert blared. This time systems began shutting down. First, the navigation controls went dark. Then the artificial gravity failed, leaving him momentarily weightless in the cockpit. Panic flared in his chest as the ship spiraled out of control, dropping like a stone. "I need backup power now," Ethan shouted. But his voice was swallowed by the chaos around him. He slammed his hand on the emergency override, hoping to reroute power to the thrusters, but it was too late. The ship careened toward the surface, and all he could do was brace for impact. With a deafening crash, the ship hit the ground. Ethan was thrown forward, his harness digging into his chest as the cockpit filled with smoke and sparks. For a moment, he lay there, dazed and disoriented, his ears ringing. The acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled his nose. "Status report," he croaked, but the AI was silent. Every screen in front of him was dark, shattered from the force of the crash. Slowly, Ethan unclasped his harness and pushed himself upright. His head throbbed, but he seemed mostly intact. Outside the viewport, the planet stretched out before him, a wasteland of cracked earth and swirling dust storms. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, climbing out of the wreckage. The air was breathable, but thick, carrying a strange metallic taste. He grabbed his gear, a portable energy scanner, his survival pack, and a blaster, before stepping out onto the alien soil. Ethan surveyed the landscape. The planet was a desolate place, the ground uneven and broken, stretching out to jagged mountains in the distance. The sky was a dull, sickly green, filled with swirling clouds that occasionally sparked with strange purple lightning. There was no sign of life, no indication that anything had ever lived here, yet the energy signature was still pulsing. Following the scanner's readings, Ethan made his way toward the source of the signal. His boots crunched against the dry, cracked surface as he moved deeper into the wilderness. The terrain was difficult, and the heat was oppressive. Hours passed, but the strange pull of the energy signature grew stronger, almost as if it was calling to him. And then he saw her. At first, Ethan thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. In the distance, a figure appeared, tall and ethereal, standing perfectly still amidst the desolation. As he drew closer, the figure became clearer. She was humanoid, but taller and more slender than any human he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in the faint light, a pale silver that seemed to reflect the sky. Her hair, long and flowing, was a brilliant shade of white, moving gently as though touched by a non-existent breeze. But it was her eyes that captivated him most, glowing a soft, otherworldly violet. They seemed to pierce through him, as if she could see into his very soul. Ethan stopped a few paces away, his heart pounding. He had encountered alien species before during his time in the solar fleet, but none had ever looked like this. She was stunning, an image of elegance and grace. Yet there was something about her that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, the alien raised a hand. Instantly, his surroundings shifted. The barren desert landscape blurred, and he found himself standing in what appeared to be an ancient temple, its walls carved with intricate, glowing symbols that pulsed with the same energy he had been tracking. His head spun, and he staggered, trying to get his bearings. What? What just happened? You have entered a place of great danger, Earthling, a voice said, but it wasn't spoken aloud. The words echoed in his mind. Ethan turned to face the alien, who stood before him, her expression calm but her eyes intense. Who are you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. His translator device was useless here. He realized she wasn't speaking any known language, but communicating telepathically. I am Serana, guardian of Zilara, she replied, her mental voice smooth and melodic, yet carrying a weight of authority. And you should not have come here. Ethan blinked, trying to process what was happening. Zilara? Is that the name of this planet? It is what remains of my world, she said, her gaze shifting to the ancient walls around them. A world that was once vibrant and full of life, but is now nothing more than a husk, and soon even that will be gone. Ethan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Gone? What do you mean? Serana's violet eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, he felt the full gravity of the situation pressing down on him. You are in the path of something far greater than yourself, Earthling. Something that has already claimed my people, and now it is coming for yours. Before Ethan could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground beneath them. The walls of the temple trembled, and the air became thick with a palpable sense of dread. Serana's expression darkened. The Rakharn are coming, she said quietly, and there is no time to waste. Ethan felt a wave of fear and confusion wash over him. He had no idea who or what the Rakharn were, but the urgency in Serana's voice told him that whatever they were nothing good. Why did you save me? He asked, his voice hoarse. Why not just let me crash and die like the rest of your world? Serana's gaze softened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of emotion behind her calm exterior. Because you are important, Earthling. Your arrival here was not by chance. Ethan stared at her, stunned. Me? How can I be important to any of this? Serana stepped closer, her presence both intimidating and strangely comforting. You are more connected to this place than you realize, and together we may be able to stop what is coming. Ethan didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. Whatever it was, he was now a part of it. He had no choice but to trust Serana, because if she was right, it wasn't just his life on the line. It was the fate of the entire universe. And so, with no other options, Ethan nodded. Tell me what I need to do. Serana smiled faintly. Follow me. There is much to learn, and even less time to prepare. As they ventured deeper into the temple, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been irrevocably changed. The crash, the alien, the temple. It was all leading toward something far greater than anything he had ever imagined. And somehow, he was at the center of it. The stone corridors of the ancient temple stretched endlessly before Ethan, as he followed Serana deeper into the heart of Zilara. Faintly glowing glyphs lined the walls, casting a soft, eerie light on the pair as they walked. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and time, and each step echoed hollowly against the cold floor. As they descended further, Ethan felt as if he were walking through the memories of a forgotten world, a world that had once thrived but now lay in ruins. Serana moved silently ahead of him, her presence ethereal and commanding. Her silver hair flowed behind her like liquid metal, shimmering under the temple's soft glow. Ethan struggled to keep pace, his mind still grappling with everything she had told him. The planet, the Rakharn, her cryptic words about his importance. It all felt unreal, like he had stepped into a nightmare with no clear way out. Finally, they reached a large, circular chamber at the center of the temple. In the middle of the room stood a massive, floating structure, an orb made of interconnected crystal shards suspended in midair by invisible forces. The glyphs on the walls brightened, and the air hummed with energy. This place was different from the rest of the temple. It was alive, pulsating with a power that Ethan could feel in his bones. Serana stopped in front of the orb and turned to face him. "This is the core of Zilara," she said, her mental voice resonating in his mind. "It holds the memories of my people, and the truth of what brought us to this point." Ethan approached the orb cautiously, the energy radiating from it growing more intense with each step. You said your world was destroyed? By the Rakarn? Who? What? Are they? Serana's violet eyes darkened, and she placed a hand on the orb. Instantly, the room was filled with light, and the space around them seemed to warp and shift. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't standing in the chamber anymore. He was in the middle of a great city. Towers of glass and light stretched into the sky, shimmering bridges connecting floating platforms. The sky was a deep blue, with twin suns casting golden light over the vibrant metropolis. "This is how Zilara once was," Serana said, her voice soft and filled with sadness. "We were the Illyrians, a people of peace, of exploration and knowledge. Our civilization spanned across many worlds. We had mastered the secrets of the universe, telepathy, energy manipulation, and even time itself." As she spoke, figures of Illyrians appeared around them, walking the streets of the grand city. They looked much like Serana, tall, elegant, with shimmering skin and glowing eyes. They were a people in harmony with their surroundings. Their technology seamlessly integrated with nature. Ethan marveled at the beauty of it all. "But with knowledge comes danger," Serana continued, her tone growing darker. The vision shifted and the bright sky turned black. The city began to tremble as massive ships appeared in the sky, blocking out the suns. The Rakarn had arrived. "They came without warning, without mercy," Serana said, her voice shaking slightly. "The Rakarn were conquerors, a race driven by a singular hunger for control. They desired our technology, our power, and our world. We were not prepared for such ruthless invaders." The city below was suddenly consumed by chaos. The once peaceful Illyrians were now running in terror as the Rakarn descended from their ships. These invaders were monstrous in appearance, hulking figures with dark metallic armor and faces obscured by helmets. They wielded weapons that crackled with dark energy, tearing through buildings and disintegrating everything in their path. The once vibrant city was reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. Serana's voice dropped to a whisper. "We fought back, but it was no use. The Rakarn were relentless. For every ship we destroyed, 10 more would take its place. They decimated our world, enslaving those who survived and destroying everything we held dear." Ethan watched, horrified, as the Illyrians fought a losing battle against the invaders. Their advanced technology, once a source of wonder, was powerless against the sheer brutality of the Rakarn. Cities fell, one after another, until nothing was left but ash and smoke. "How did you survive?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Serana's face grew distant, her glowing eyes filled with old pain. "In the end, we had no choice but to take drastic measures. My people built this temple, the core, as our final act of desperation. We created a temporal stasis field, freezing the planet in time to halt the Rakarn's advance. But the cost was immense." The vision shifted again, and Ethan saw Serana and a group of Illyrian leaders standing before the core, preparing to activate the stasis field. They looked weary, defeated, and yet resolute. As the stasis field was triggered, time itself seemed to freeze. The Rakarn ships halted in midair, their destructive weapons frozen in motion. The Illyrians had stopped the invasion, but at the cost of their own lives. They had trapped themselves in a prison of time, doomed to remain in stasis forever. Serana's image remained, standing alone in the now desolate landscape. "I was chosen as the guardian of Zilara," she said quietly, "the last of my kind, charged with maintaining the stasis and ensuring the Rakarn never return. But now, the stasis is failing." The vision faded, and they were back in the chamber, the floating orb glowing softly in the center of the room. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "The energy anomaly? That's the stasis field breaking down, isn't it?" Serana nodded, her face grim. "Yes. Your arrival here disrupted the delicate balance of the field. The Rakarn have already sensed the change. They are returning, and this time, there is nothing left to stop them." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. An ancient race, a temporal prison, and an unstoppable enemy that was about to be unleashed upon the universe. It was overwhelming. "But why me?" he asked, shaking his head. "Why am I so important in all of this? I'm just a pilot, a scientist. What can I possibly do to help?" Sarana stepped closer, her violet eyes piercing into his. You are more than just a pilot, Ethan Miles. Your presence here is no coincidence. The Corps responded to your arrival. It recognized something within you, something vital to the defense of this world. The Illyrian technology can only be activated by one who shares our energy signature, and somehow you carry a trace of that within you. Ethan blinked, his heart pounding. What are you saying? That I'm part Illyrian? I do not know how, Sarana admitted, but you possess a link to our people, a connection that has brought you here. It is that connection that will allow us to reactivate the Corps and use its power to fight back against the Rakarn. Without it, we have no chance. Ethan took a step back, his mind reeling. This was too much. How could he possibly be connected to an ancient race from another galaxy? None of it made sense. I don't know if I can do this, he said, his voice wavering. Sarana reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm, and despite the overwhelming circumstances, Ethan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. I know this is difficult to understand, she said softly, but you are not alone in this. Together we may be able to stop the Rakarn and save both our worlds. Ethan looked into her glowing eyes, searching for answers. There was something about her, something that made him believe her, despite the impossibility of it all. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, or the sadness in her gaze. Or maybe it was the bond they had begun to form, however strange and sudden. I'll help, Ethan said finally, his voice steadying, but I don't know how much use I'll be. Sarana smiled faintly, the tension in her face easing slightly. That is all I ask. The rest we will figure out together. As they stood before the Corps, preparing to face an ancient enemy that had once nearly destroyed an entire civilization, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been leading up to this moment. He didn't know how, and he didn't know why, but he was connected to this place, to this world, in ways he couldn't yet understand. And now, the fate of two civilizations rested on his shoulders. The chamber was bathed in a soft luminescence as Ethan and Sarana stood before the core of Zilara. The orb pulsed gently, reacting to their presence. Sarana guided Ethan's hand toward the surface of the orb, her fingers lightly brushing against his. A surge of warmth coursed through him as their energies intertwined with the core's. Symbols and glyphs ignited across the orb's surface, illuminating the chamber with intricate patterns of light. Focus your thoughts, Sarana whispered into his mind. Let the core sense your intentions. Ethan closed his eyes, concentrating on the strange connection he felt to this place. Images flashed through his mind, glimpses of the Illyrian civilization, moments of joy, of discovery, of unity. He felt Sarana's presence beside him, her thoughts blending with his. The core responded, its glow intensifying as it absorbed their combined energies. Good, Sarana said softly. You're beginning to understand. He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. I can feel it, he said aloud, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. It's like the core is alive, aware. She nodded. It holds the essence of my people, their hopes, their dreams, their will to survive. And now, it resonates with you. They spent hours working together, deciphering the ancient Illyrian technology. Sarana taught him how to manipulate the energy fields, how to channel his thoughts to interact with the core. Despite the urgency of their mission, these moments felt timeless. The barriers between them seemed to fade, replaced by a growing understanding and mutual respect. During a brief respite, they sat on a stone ledge overlooking a subterranean lake that shimmered with bioluminescent life. The water cast dancing reflections on the cavern walls, creating an atmosphere of serene beauty. Tell me about Earth, Sarana said, her eyes reflecting the ethereal glow. What is your world like? Ethan smiled, thinking of home. It's complicated, he began. We've achieved so much, technology, art, exploration, but we also struggle with conflict and division. Sometimes I wonder if we're worthy of the universe we've begun to explore. Sarana regarded him thoughtfully. Every civilization has its trials. The Illyrians were not without flaws. Our pursuit of knowledge sometimes blinded us to the simpler joys of existence. He looked at her, curiosity piqued. Like what? She tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. Like taking a moment to appreciate beauty, she said, gesturing toward the glowing lake. Or forging genuine connections with others. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the weight of their situation lifted. Ethan felt a warmth spreading through him, a sense of comfort he hadn't realized he'd been missing. I think I understand, he said quietly. They continued to share stories, bridging the gap between their worlds. Sarana spoke of Illyrian art and music, of festivals that celebrated the cycles of their twin suns. Ethan told her about Earth's diverse cultures, its vast oceans, and the simple pleasure of a sunset over the horizon. As the days passed, their bond deepened. Together they navigated the complexities of the Illyrian defenses, working in unison to prepare for the impending arrival of the Rakarn. Yet, amidst the urgency, they found solace in each other's company. One evening, as they stood atop the temple's highest tower, they watched the alien sky together. The swirling clouds parted to reveal a breathtaking display of stars, unfamiliar constellations glittering like jewels against the velvet darkness. It's beautiful, Ethan murmured. Yes, Sarana agreed, but it's more than just stars. Each light you see is a gateway, a path to another world. He glanced at her. Is that how you see the universe? As a network of possibilities? She smiled softly. Perhaps, or maybe it's a reminder that we're all connected, no matter how distant our worlds may be. Ethan felt a surge of emotion, admiration, affection, something deeper he couldn't quite name. Sarana, Before he could finish, a tremor shook the ground beneath them. The sky above flashed with ominous red streaks as distant explosions erupted in the atmosphere. They're here, Sarana said, her voice tinged with a mix of fear and resolve. They hurried back to the core chamber, where alarms began to sound, a haunting melody that echoed through the ancient halls. The glyphs along the walls flickered erratically, reflecting the growing instability of the planet's defenses. Ethan activated the communication console they had repaired earlier. Screens displayed images of the Rakarn fleet breaching the planet's outer perimeter, dark, jagged ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. We need to initiate the planetary shield, Sarana said urgently. They moved to the control platform, their hands working swiftly over the holographic interfaces. Energy surged through the core, and a translucent barrier began to form around the planet. But as the shield expanded, the strain on the core became evident. Sparks flew from the conduits, and the chamber trembled. It's not holding, Ethan said, frustration evident in his voice. The power levels are dropping too fast. Sarana's expression grew grim. The core was damaged during the last invasion. It doesn't have the capacity to generate a full shield anymore. Then we'll have to find another way, he insisted. There has to be an alternative. She hesitated, her eyes reflecting inner turmoil. There is one possibility, she admitted. A direct infusion of life energy could bolster the core's power. Ethan frowned. Life energy? You mean someone's life force? She nodded slowly. Yes, it would require a complete transfer. The donor would not survive. The weight of her words sank in. You can't be considering this, he said, his voice laced with disbelief. Sarana met his gaze steadily. It's the only way to ensure the shield holds long enough to repel the Rakarn. If we fail, not only will Zilara fall, but the path to Earth will be open to them. No, Ethan said firmly. We'll find another solution. We can reroute auxiliary power, deactivate non-essential systems. There isn't time, she interrupted gently. The Rakarn are already penetrating the outer defenses. He clenched his fists. Then let me do it. Use my life energy. Sarana's eyes widened in surprise. You don't understand. Your human physiology wouldn't survive the process. It has to be me. Ethan shook his head vehemently. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. There has to be another way. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. The touch sent a familiar warmth through him. Ethan, my purpose has always been to protect Zilara. My life has been prolonged beyond its natural span to fulfill this duty. If my end means the survival of others, then it is a worthy sacrifice. He covered her hand with his own. But what about everything we've found here? The connection we share? Are you willing to throw that away? Her eyes softened, and for a moment vulnerability broke through her composed exterior. "Our connection is something I never expected," she admitted. "In all my years of solitude, I had forgotten what it meant to feel understood." "Then stay," he urged. "Fight with me. We can face them together." A faint smile touched her lips. "Your courage is admirable, but some battles require more than bravery." Before he could protest further, alarms blared loudly. The Rakarn were intensifying their attack, targeting the weak points in the planet's defenses. The ground quaked violently, causing debris to fall from the chamber's ceiling. Serana withdrew her hand. "It's time." Desperation clawed at Ethan. "Wait," he called out as she moved toward the core. "If you do this, what happens to the Illyrian legacy? What happens to us?" She paused, looking back at him with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "The legacy will live on through you," she said. "The core has imprinted the knowledge of my people onto your consciousness. You carry our history now." Ethan felt a rush of information flooding his mind. Visions of Illyrian art, science, philosophy. It was overwhelming, yet comforting, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "Serana, please," he pleaded. "There has to be another way." She gave him a tender look. "Thank you, Ethan, for reminding me of what it means to truly live. You've given me a gift beyond measure." With that, she stepped into the central platform beneath the core. Energy strands descended, wrapping around her like tendrils of light. The core's glow intensified, and a beam of energy shot upward, piercing through the temple's roof into the sky. The planetary shield solidified, its translucent hue shifting to an impenetrable barrier. The Rakarn ships collided with it, exploding on impact. The fleet recoiled, unable to breach the defense. Ethan watched in anguish as Serana's form began to dissipate within the light. He could feel her life force merging with the core, amplifying its power beyond its damaged capacity. "Serana!" he shouted, reaching out. Her voice echoed in his mind one last time. "Live well, Ethan. Remember us." And then she was gone. The chamber fell silent, the only sound the distant rumble of the Rakarn retreating. The core hovered serenely, its mission complete. Ethan sank to his knees, a profound emptiness settling over him. He had gained so much knowledge, yet it felt hollow without her presence. The connection they shared was severed, leaving an ache he couldn't fathom. After what felt like hours, he rose unsteadily. The core's glow dimmed, and the temple seemed less alive. He knew what he had to do. With the Illyrian knowledge now part of him, Ethan made his way back to his crashed ship. Using newfound understanding, he repaired the vessel with materials from the temple, enhancing it with Illyrian technology. The ship hummed with renewed energy, ready for the journey ahead. As he prepared for departure, he took one last look at the temple in the distance. "I won't forget," he whispered. Launching into the sky, he set a course for Earth. The stars stretched out before him, gateways to countless worlds. But his path was clear. He carried with him the legacy of the Illyrians, the memory of Serana, and a warning of the darkness that lurked among the stars. The Rakarn were still out there, and others would need to be prepared. As the ship entered hyperspace, Ethan vowed to honor Serana's sacrifice. Their bond had transcended worlds, and her influence would guide him in the challenges to come. The universe was vast and filled with both wonder and peril, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. Ethan sat at the helm of his newly enhanced ship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, grief, anger, and a profound sense of responsibility. Serana's sacrifice weighed heavily on him, her final words echoing in his mind. "Live well, Ethan. Remember us." But as the ship's systems hummed with the faint energy of Illyrian technology, Ethan knew that remembering wasn't enough. The Rakarn were still out there, regrouping, preparing for another assault. This time perhaps against Earth. He had to warn humanity, share the knowledge Serana had given him, and prepare them for the coming threat. But for now, he had one final mission on Zilara, to ensure Serana's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. His fingers brushed against the console, now linked to his mind through the Illyrian enhancements. The ship responded instantly, following his unspoken commands as he flew over the vast, scarred surface of Zilara. Below, the planet was eerily silent, the remnants of the Rakarn fleet scattered in debris fields across the landscape. The once vibrant world had long since withered, but now it was entirely still. Zilara, for all its beauty and grandeur, had become a graveyard. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the Illyrian knowledge stirring inside him. He had access to their vast stores of wisdom, science, art, history. But it was Serana's personal memories that haunted him most. He could see flashes of her life, standing at the helm of Illyrian councils, the laughter of her people in sunlit cities, and her final moments of solitude as guardian of a dying world. And now it was over. Serana was gone, and the last echoes of the Illyrians were entrusted to him. The ship descended toward the temple, the heart of the planet's defenses. The core still hummed with energy, though the warmth and vibrancy it once had were diminished, almost as if it was in mourning too. Ethan stepped out of the ship and walked toward the temple's entrance, each step feeling heavier than the last. As he entered the grand hall, the flickering glyphs on the walls seemed to dim, their light barely reaching the edges of the chamber. The core hovered in the center, its glow faint and subdued. Ethan stood before it, staring at the platform where Serana had made her final sacrifice. He placed a hand on the core, feeling its energy pulse weakly under his touch. "It's done," he said softly. The shield held. "You did it, Serana." The core pulsed in response, a slow, mournful rhythm. He could feel the residual energy of Serana lingering within it, her life force, now part of the planet's defenses. But even as the shield had held, the strain was evident. Zilara had been saved from immediate destruction, but it was clear the planet would not survive another onslaught. Ethan stepped back, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'll protect your legacy," he promised. "I'll make sure Earth is ready." But as he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The core brightened slightly, and a series of symbols flashed across its surface, familiar ones that Ethan had seen during his time with Serana. But there was something new in the patterns, something that hadn't been there before. A message. Ethan's heart pounded as the symbols formed words in his mind. A voice, not Serana's, but similar, whispering through the chamber. Guardian transfer initiated. New designation, Ethan Miles. He froze. The core was reaching out to him, offering him the same role Serana had carried for centuries, a new guardian. "You must protect Zilara, protect the knowledge," the core seemed to say. "The Rakarn will return." Ethan's mind raced. He had come to warn Earth, to ensure humanity was prepared for the Rakarn's return. But now, the planet was calling him to stay, to become what Serana had been, an eternal protector, bound to the core, to Zilara. It wasn't a position he had ever imagined for himself, and the thought of spending his life, perhaps centuries, alone on a dying world chilled him to the bone. "No," Ethan said, stepping back from the core. "That's not my role. I can't do this. I have to go back to Earth. There's more at stake." The core flashed brighter, its energy intensifying. He could feel it probing his mind, searching for his resolve, for a way to convince him. The core's urgency pressed down on him, and he could feel the weight of the Illyrian legacy tugging at him, pleading with him to stay. "Ethan Miles, you are chosen. You must protect the galaxy." Ethan clenched his fists. "I can protect the galaxy by going back, by fighting the Rakarn on my terms, not trapped here." But the core was relentless. Visions of Serana's sacrifice filled his mind. Her final moments, her willingness to give everything to protect Zilara. And now it was asking the same of him. Ethan's hands trembled. Could he really do this? Could he become the guardian of a world he didn't belong to, a world that was already dying? Or was his place among the stars with the people of Earth, preparing for the battle that was yet to come? He stepped back, his heart racing. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't." The core pulsed again, but this time its light dimmed in acceptance. The energy that had flared moments before faded, leaving the chamber in an eerie quiet. The core understood. It knew Ethan's path was different from Serana's. With one last look at the core, Ethan turned and left the temple. As he boarded his ship, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The core would hold, at least for a time, and he had done all he could to honor Serana's legacy. But now, his mission was clear. return to Earth, share what he had learned, and prepare for the fight that lay ahead. 3 months later, Earth's Solar Fleet headquarters, Ethan stood before the Council, the top brass of Earth's defense forces, as they watched the holographic display of the Rakarn invasion of Zilara. His ship had been recovered, his warnings delivered, and now the leaders of humanity were seeing firsthand the enemy they would soon face. "This is the Rakarn," Ethan said, his voice steady. "They are coming, and if we're not ready, they'll do to Earth what they nearly did to Zilara." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard stories of alien threats before, but none had ever seemed as imminent, as tangible, as what Ethan was presenting. "You're sure this isn't just an isolated incident?" one of the generals asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, the Rakarn won't stop at Zilara. They seek control, domination of every world they encounter. We need to be ready." The council remained silent, the gravity of the situation settling over them like a storm cloud. After what felt like an eternity, the head of the fleet, Admiral Torres, stood up. "We'll begin preparations immediately," she said. "Full mobilization of the Solar Fleet. And, Lieutenant Miles, we'll need your knowledge of Illyrian technology. You're our key to defending Earth." Ethan nodded. "I'll help in any way I can." As the meeting concluded, Ethan walked out onto the observation deck, looking out at Earth, its oceans and continents sprawling below. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he allowed himself to breathe, to relax, if only for a moment. But his mind lingered on Zilara, on the temple, and most of all, on Serana. She had sacrificed everything for him, for her people, for the hope that something of their legacy would survive. And now it was up to him to make sure that her sacrifice had meaning. The stars stretched out before him, a vast and dangerous expanse. The Rakarn were still out there, waiting, watching. But this time, Ethan was ready. With Serana's memory guiding him, and the knowledge of the Illyrians imprinted in his mind, he would face them. Not as a guardian bound to one world, but as a defender of many. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the battle for the galaxy had only just begun.